Welcome back to ELA Bootcamp students. Today we're going to take a look at writing dialogue in sentences. So you might be thinking, but I'm mostly writing essays and TQA paragraphs and explaining stuff. Why do I need to know how to write dialogue? Well, you might use the same strategies for dialogue when doing MLA citations. This will show up in essays and research papers, and that'll be our final unit. But why know how to dialogue and sentence? Why know how to write that? Well, dialogue's going to show up in writing you do for high school and possibly in college, known as narrative writing or storytelling writing. So when you write and you include characters, the purpose of stories is to bring life to it and immerse the reader in that world of storytelling. There's no better way to do that than to show how the characters communicate. So when we think of communication, we think of these speech bubbles. And right away when I say dialogue and quotation marks, some students feel intimidated. I'm going to present you with 5 rules and examples for how to write dialogue. It can get more complex, but remember folks, this is ELA Bootcamp. We keep it basic. So let's take a look at how you would use dialogue in narrative or story writing, or maybe in personal essays this year and in your future. We'll check the punctuation, and you don't have to feel intimidated. Let's go. So here's your 5 rules. Ready? It looks like a lot. Wow. But don't worry. Here's what you need to know. Dialogue is its own sentence, but does not always receive end punctuation. I know that sounds crazy, but we'll get back to it. Rule number 2. Dialogue is being captured in quotation marks. Fun story, those little vertical quotation marks in ancient times, well, medieval times, were drawn horizontally like spoken lips, people's mouths, but that got really confusing, so they flipped them vertical. So those are little mouths that are talking quotation marks. Does that make it easier to understand how we're capturing dialogue? I like that. We express dialogue in all cases as a declarative sentence. You're going to say, what if they're asking a question? The dialogue that's captured is a question, but the dialogue sentence as it is written contains the dialogue that's captured and a statement for who said it. We're going to call that a dialogue tag. The dialogue, if it ends with a question mark for Rule 3 or exclamation point, doesn't need an added period because that's kind of redundant. We don't like that. Rule number 4, commas are our friends. We use them for pauses like speed bumps. We use them in place of a period when writing the dialogue, except at the end of the sentence. Rule number 5, dialogue tags identify who is speaking, and they need a comma before the quote. This lets the audience, the reader, process who's doing the talking. So check out our examples for rule number 1. I ate pizza for lunch and dinner today. So this itself is not really a dialogue sentence because we need a dialogue tag. Now, if you had a long-running stream of dialogue where the speaker is understood by the reader, this is fine, though it would need end punctuation. So my question is, who says this? Let's use a boy named Saul as the speaker. We'd write the dialogue tag thusly. I ate pizza for lunch and dinner today, said Saul. So typically, if this was a sentence, it would have a period at the end. But because I'm not finished with my declarative statement, I need to pause for the reader, give a verb, said, and the speaker, Saul. Period goes at the end. Dialogue writing is easy because you can invert the way you write it. So instead of writing it this way, I could flip it and say Saul said with a pause to process for the reader. Now they're ready to go on. Quote, remember they're like little mouths talking, I ate pizza for lunch and dinner. We put the period here but not outside because it's implied that I'm coming to a full stop. That's the end of my idea. I'm ready for a new sentence and a new idea. Depending on where you place the dialogue tag and quote, the period does or does not exist at the end of the sentence, and the comma will also switch places. Here's rule number 2. Dialogue is still being expressed as a declarative sentence since the writer is stating that the words were said by someone else. So Mona doesn't like olives is what these 4 examples are about. Look how each of these sentences still ends with a period. My verb will change to match the type of sentence. The sentences themselves being quoted in dialogue in the quotes, those will change, but it's all declarative. Check it out. I hate the taste of olives, explained Mona. These are both declarative, so I just switch out that period for a comma. Do you hate the taste of olives? This is interrogative, so I changed my verb to asked, and I changed my punctuation to a question mark because she's interrogating someone or asking a question. Olives taste like butt. So this is pretty slang and immature, but she's shouting this out as an exclamation. So I use that exclamation point. She's yelling this. Notice even though she's shouting, still a declarative sentence though. Here's for the really smart grammar kid. Throw those olives out now, demanded Mona. She's shouting. Isn't this an exclamatory sentence? No, I waited for you to shout "no" at the computer screen. That's because we know this is an imperative sentence. She's giving a demand. She's commanding that we do this. She wants those olives in the trash. So despite what type of sentence you write, you always want to make sure you follow through and have declarative punctuation as needed, as applicable at the end of the sentence. Here's rule number 3 where we get a little complicated. So for rule number 3, when ending a sentence with dialogue that uses a question mark or exclamation, period is implied and can be left out. This avoids weird punctuation redundancy. The wrong way, Joni asked, "Who was that?" with a question mark and a period? The correct way would be Joni asked, "What," or "Who was that?" and the question mark is left just there inside the quote, and that's inferred to be the end of the sentence because we'll space and capitalize for the next sentence. Wrong example, Hamza shouted, "Watch out," with a period. Instead it would be Hamza shouted, "Watch out." No period necessary. So you're saying, oh wait, can't I put like a question mark and an exclamation point because he's shouting a question? That's called an interrobang, and it's not really an official punctuation mark we use in writing. It's used in some advertisements and some forms of writing. I'm going to discourage you from using it. It's very informal and it's confusing. Moreover, it shows that as a writer, you don't know how to make a decision what you're doing. Like for Joni up here, if I want to get the point across that she is shouting this question, I could use better, more vivid verbs. If I write Joni screamed, "What was that?" the reader can infer it's a question being screamed or shouted. That paints a better picture for my story. That makes me a better writer. This interrobang, it's just lazy. Wait, what if I want to emphasize they're really screaming? Can I double up on exclamation points? Absolutely not. That's little kid stuff. That is not official or formal. Please don't do that. One and done for exclamation always. Here's rule number 4. A comma is used in place of a period when writing a divided quotation, like the one down here on the bottom. This is done to avoid confusion and to provide pause. I was there the entire time. Period is the end of the sentence, but we don't do that. We use a comma. Explain the butler with the dialogue tag. End of sentence declarative. The butler explained, pause, I was there the entire time, period, and you're finished. So if I want to combine things, I could say, I was there the entire time, explained the butler, period. I saw nothing out of the ordinary. Now I don't need a dialogue tag again because it's inferred that the butler is still talking, and we continue from there. Let's wrap up. Here are alternate ways to write dialogue. We invert the quotation. How can you even ask that? Screamed Donna. Donna screamed. How can you even ask that? Or we could divide a quotation. For your information, sneered Rodney, I was home the entire time. I was home all night, stated Rodney. Where were you? I was home all night. Where were you? Explained Rodney. So in all 3 of these examples, I'm basically containing the same information, but I'm varying my verbs for how it's expressed, and I'm varying the manner in which I'm having Rodney state it. The bottom example especially goes into detail by containing both sentences together. I don't always recommend that since you want to get across the dialogue tag fairly early to assist with comprehension. That's it. So now that you know all about how to write dialogue, let's enhance your ability. I want you to make the verb said dead. Said and its variations are very basic and dull ways to write, and as I've said before, varying up your verbiage will allow you to achieve more specific showing and telling in your writing. If you just say, he said it, that's boring. If you show me with more vivid verbs, then it's much more interesting for the reader. Look at the bottom. I tried my best, said Jolene. Okay. I tried my best, Jolene wailed as the tears streamed down her cheeks. Tells us that maybe she failed, or could these be tears of joy? It makes me want to investigate and read further because now I have an image in my head. Who are you? Asked the officer. Okay. Who are you? Demanded the officer. Ooh, now I'm characterizing. Is this an intimidating officer? Are they trying to get to the bottom of something? Is this an urgent situation? Are they afraid? Now we have more storytelling happening because we made said dead. So try to use stronger verbs whenever you do include dialogue. Next time, we're going to look at citations and sentences. The skills for using this involve the same strategies as writing dialogue. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll see you in the last video.